Hi, I'm Maris Kreisman, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you tonight to another excellent virtual event at McNally Jackson. If you go to mcnallyjackson.com and look at our events calendar, you'll see all the amazing writers and programs we're hosting in the coming weeks. So please keep an eye on the site or subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about what's coming soon. There will be time at the end of tonight's conversation for your questions, so start thinking about them now. You can put your questions in the Zoom chat, and we'll get to them towards the end of the evening. We're glad that even though we can't all be in the same room at the moment, we're still able to host events during this difficult time. As we've weathered the pandemic and reopened all 4 of our locations for browsing and shopping, indie bookstores like ours still need more support. And so if you enjoy free events like this one and want us to keep hosting more of them, please buy books from us. Throughout the evening, I'll post links in the chat to buy White Magic from McNally Jackson. And it's such a thrill to be celebrating this book tonight, along with 2 wonderful authors. So let me introduce them. Elissa Washuta is a member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe and a nonfiction writer. She's the author of Starvation Mode and My Body is a Book of Rules, named a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. With Teresa Warburton, she's co-editor of the anthology Shapes of Native Nonfiction Collective Essays by Contemporary Writers. She's an assistant professor of creative writing at Ohio State University. And joining her tonight is Maaza Mengiste. Born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Maaza received a 2020 award in literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Also a Fulbright scholar and a professor at Queens College, she's the author of The Shadow King and Beneath the Lion's Gaze, and a 2018 recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. She lives in New York City. It's delightful to have you both, and if Elissa, you would like to start us off with a reading, we would love that.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna adjust my mic a little bit. I realize it's far away. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to get to talk to Maaza. Thank you all for coming tonight. So I'm gonna read a little bit from White Magic. So this is from kind of the middle of an early essay in the book. The essay is called The Spirit Corridor. Doors at the bottom of the rabbit hole. My Catholic picture books made me think heaven was a town built on a layer of stratocumulus clouds, which disappointed me because I wanted a heaven like the garden on the other side of the door in Alice's Wonderland. I considered myself the true owner of the library's copy of Disney's Alice in Wonderland, nesting in its puffy white VHS case until I could bring it home again. I studied Alice as she crept through the black woods and sat in disoriented defeat among the mome raths. I watched her shrink and grow. I was looking for the garden too. Our lawn violets never spoke. There had to be a door somewhere, but I couldn't even find a rabbit hole to fall down. In the woods, I turned over rocks, looking for the underworld, always fearing I'd find a nest of snakes instead. Once I could read, I worked through the book enough times to memorize parts. Maybe my woods were already Wonderland. Maybe my cat would dissolve into a hanging grin. At school, when boys played games that ended with the loser having to kiss me without my invitation, I understood I was stuck somewhere, like Alice. Quote, there were doors all around the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. In the Disney adaptation, Alice faces only one door. It is locked and has a talking face. You did give me quite a turn, the door puns, and makes sure we get the joke. Rather good, what? Doorknob? Turn? Alice peers through the keyhole mouth at the garden. In my recollection of the movie, the viewer sees what she sees. I can picture it. Fountain, hedges, rose bushes, topiaries. but I imagined the image. Alice doesn't look through a door portal until the film is nearly over. She's been crying in the woods, singing to the creatures gathered to gawk at her pain, saying to herself, "It would be so nice if something would make sense for a change." When the Cheshire Cat, a puff of purple around a crescent moon of teeth, tells her there's a way out. He makes a door appear in a tree trunk. Alice steps in to meet the tyrant queen in her garden. I should have seen this as a cautionary tale. The girl thinks she's looking for something that makes sense. But the deeper she pushes, the closer she gets to the seat of senseless violence in the world. Dor and my mother. Early colonizers of the Americas believed the devil lived here, having been banished from Europe through religious effort. Europeans believed native peoples worshipped gods that served Satan. 16th century Spanish colonizers executed a Guachil woman whose people resisted conquest. She lived in a place occupied by Tlaxcalan and Tarascan converts to Christianity, and she tried to persuade them to rebel against Spanish rule by threatening them with black magic. The Spanish, fearing a loss of control, charged her with witchcraft and killed her immediately. Allison Games recounts this in Witchcraft in Early North America, writing that, quote, "Witches were not only rebels against godly order, as they were throughout Europe, but also armed rebels bent on overthrowing established governments." Revolts were blamed on the devil. The settlers became obsessed with witches. But I didn't know about any of this when I was 4, as my parents read to me from my favorite picture books, Patricia Coombs's Dory the Little Witch series. Every book begins the same. This is Dory. She is a witch, a little witch. Some arrangement of introductory details follows. Her room is messy, her socks mismatched. She has a cat named Gink and a mother known as the Big Witch. Dory strives and fails to be good. The Big Witch is important and busy. Left alone to figure out how to behave, Dory often ends up in the secret room where her mother makes magic. She fumbles with spells, coming up with her own elixirs after failing to find them in the Big Witch's book of magic. I don't know whether I understood that world to be pretend. My mother was a big witch too, important, a role model and a healer in a way, a nurse with national recognition and local renown. But I was left alone only when I wanted to be. It was my mother and father who read me the books. I mixed every liquid hair product in my parents' bathroom cabinet, hoping to come up with the spell Dory sought to ease the constriction of adult reality's force upon the glittering cloud of childhood. I held out hope for finding a book of magic that might have what I needed. My school books held only dead ends, a rule for every known thing, and everything was a known thing, except for the things the church knew to be unknown, like the mechanism God uses to turn bread into his body, or what that even means, since the communion host doesn't seem like anything but an unusual cracker melting on the tongue. But there was something existing in my house, not a being like God or Satan, but something potent and present as a gas. In the hallway surrounded by the bedroom and bathroom doors, I felt I wasn't alone. Belief in ghosts seemed to fall under superstition, which was sinful as a subcategory of idolatry. So I didn't let myself think of the women in the large old photo hanging in our house's hallway as anything but ink on framed paper. The standing woman smiled and the sitting woman did not. Their hair was gathered tight behind their heads and their skin was cloaked in black cloth. My mom said they were my great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother, granddaughter and daughter of Thomas, but this was impossible. I had never smiled at anyone as if my eyes were jaws, and I had never sat with my sadness as if it were a second nervous system. They wore black like witches, but they couldn't be because all witches were white. They knew something though. I decided to read every book in the library, looking for instructions I could use. The books I found weren't about witches. They were about otherworld travelers. In The Castle in the Attic by Elizabeth Winthrop, a boy uses a magic token to turn people into miniatures who can pass through a toy castle into another world. Lynn Reed Banks wrote about similar magic 5 years earlier in The Indian in the Cupboard, but I didn't take to that book, probably not because it features a white boy who plays God with a tiny Iroquois man. I was used to that, but because I wanted to travel to the other worlds, not have their residents come to me. In Anne Lindbergh's Travel Far, Pay No Fare, two children use a magic bookmark to go into the worlds of books. Inside one, a woman says, "Houses aren't the only things with windows. Time and space may well have them too." I collected library bookmarks and tried every one, hoping to travel across the threshold of the page. I even made my own, carefully lettered with the words from the book. "Travel far, pay no fare, let a story take you there." I couldn't get it to work, so I reread the book periodically, looking for a missed step in the instructions. I found my answer in A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. The journey between worlds was a tesseract, travel in the fifth dimension, possible only by the thoroughly initiated, which I was not. Playing in time and space is a dangerous game, says the protagonist's father. It's a frightening as well as an exciting thing to discover that matter and energy are the same thing, that size is an illusion, and that time is a material substance. We can know this, but it's far more than we can understand with our puny little brains. All these books illuminated small pieces of the same set of principles. There were too many connections for the magic not to be real. The books never taught me to travel to other worlds, so I began to wonder whether I could manipulate this one. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to start this video. The host has stopped my video. So maybe Maris can start my video. Yes.
I'm here and I'm trying. I just want you to know. Let's see.
And at least if Elissa can hear me, we can just do that until let me do that while you fix that. Elissa, thank you. That was really beautiful. Right now it looks like I'm somewhere far away from where I actually am.
Where are you?
Well, right now or in the picture?
Right now, where are you?
I'm in New York. And you know, it's one of the things that I wanted to start off with was talking about when you and I first met in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the Creative Capital orientation, and then we also had a chance to really hang out a bit at the retreat. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, a little bit more. But I wanted to start off by telling you how much I've been looking forward to this book. Our conversations about it when we first met felt so exciting to me. Your vision for it of where you wanted to take it, what you wanted to do with the messages of it, really, they felt dynamic. And so I am thrilled to be here talking to you about it. I'm thinking back to the presentation that you gave on this book during our retreat. And it was, you mentioned during the presentation that, you know, it could be a collection of essays. Some people would call it experimental nonfiction, but you preferred exquisite vessel. And
Maaza, I'm just gonna try again to start your video.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. I am wearing the white magic t-shirt, everyone. you mentioned exquisite vessel. So that's what you would prefer. And I do think this book, I mean, it's exquisite in the most literal sense, but I'm drawn to this idea of a book as a vessel. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I love talking about exquisite vessels. So this term is one that my friend Teresa Warburton and I use in the introduction to our anthology, Shapes of Native Nonfiction. And we're kind of trying to think about essays that could be called maybe experimental or could be called lyric essays. I don't know, people use other kinds of terms like innovative and whatever. But none of those felt quite like a fit for what we wanted to look at in this work by Native writers and this, this work that also I was doing as one of them. I had always been thinking about, I like to explain craft concepts to my students using weird analogies. It's like sometimes the only way I can explain myself. And I had been using a not very weird analogy to talk about form and talk about containers. Just the basic concept of how form and contents are in relationship with one another. Like a pill bottle cannot hold an apple, but maybe it can hold a bunch of thumbtacks, that kind of thing. And so I was already kind of using that. And I went out to the Suquamish Tribes Reservation a couple of times to visit Ed Carrier, a master basket weaver. And just the way he talked about weaving, of course, I'm always thinking about writing, and I was just thinking about the relationship between Coast Salish basket weaving and, baskets. We have somewhat different traditions in my tribe, but there's a lot of commonality. The materiality of the basket seemed so much to be in relationship with the sort of materiality of essays, like the shape, the form. And so that term makes sense to me as something where, the writer doesn't want the form to disappear, for the essay to, seem like it's not even something crafted, it's just complete magic trick. I'm really drawn to essays that want the reader to pay attention to the form, that, it's not just the content that, is the thing that is important and draws the reader's attention, but the form itself is done not only with intention, but also extremely visibly. So that is something that, I do in all of my work. In white magic, the essays all have different forms and different approaches to form. Some of them are more like, heavily constructed looking, I guess, in some ways than others. But it was important to me that each essay, like each line of inquiry needed its own little vessel, it needed its own bottle or whatever, and or its basket, and those were all going to be collected together in one basket of a book.
That's great. It makes me think of right from the beginning of this, the minute you open it, you see already that there's something different happening with structure throughout this entire book. You have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. You have these footnotes. I don't want to give too much away with those, but the structure is really striking here. And I'd love to hear you talk about that and talk about the craft of this. But I'm also remembering something that you said again during this retreat, that craft is something that is part of Native creativity. And I wondered about the structure of this book, and if there's that connection to vessel, but also this craft work, craftsmanship of, was also something you were aware of when crafting this book.
Yeah, like my first book, My Body is a Book of Rules. I think I've settled into this this approach that is probably going to work for me for a long time, which is an essay collection that's kind of a memoir. The essays are not only linked, but they're so closely related. They can kind of be standalone, most of them, but they also need to be read in relationship with one another in order to get their full meaning. That's how this book works. You know, I approach the writing process as such a piecemeal thing. I just focus on the subject matter in front of me that I'm interested in at that time, and I write it until I'm done, you know, with that question being answered. And that usually takes, like, I don't know, at this point, like around 40, 50 pages, I guess, or maybe fewer. But so, you know, I was just kind of like drafting these for years and didn't know what the whole book was going to be, didn't know what was going to be in or out. And I wasn't writing for a while. My life was a mess, which is the subject of the book. And I was just kind of like fumbling around trying to figure out what book I was writing, because I'm always writing a book. And they just kind of started to take like everything, the whole of them started to take shape in like late 2017, early 2018, when I began to understand what I was getting at in writing. I started to understand I was writing toward heartbreak and colonization and witchery and, you know, all of these things together, sobriety as well. So I kind of was chipping away at getting that whole, you know, thing to be a resolution of a question. And there were some older essays that I had written that form Act 2, mostly. I had written parts of them. They had to be completely redone. But I began to see the structure as this was starting out with a sort of like it's kind of like an inciting incident of me, I guess just, it's not an incident so much as an occasion of essaying, like just wanting to know, why am I still fixated on my ex-boyfriend? Starts with that narrative question, and then, you know, starts to, you know, get on a roll of kind of answering it. And then I realize, well, that's a bigger question than I understood. It's really not about him. It's about me and everything that's ever happened to me and my ancestors. And then kind of do some work trying to resolve that part, and then move on to the last phase of the question, where I'm able to finally not only get my answer, but get over him and, you know, get over these patterns that I was enacting. So I see it, you know, I put the deliberate 3-act structure in later, the introductions that you know, give shape to this, because I realized, you know, I was thinking of it as an arc, but that wasn't really apparent to my readers at the time. So, you know, I was thinking about trying to play with the idea of like a lyric essay collection having a plot. And I was so anti-plot for such a long time until I realized it's not possible. Like I'm always making plots, including in this book.
Thank you so much. It works so well. The book is a physical thing. also, I mean, it is something to be looked at, not just read, but looked at in terms of what is happening on the page. It's really beautiful. And, you know, the book is about many things, as you were saying, but one of the most striking things, or I think one of the things that people will continue to talk about, is witchcraft here, and your relationship with it and how you address it. And very early on in the book, you say, I choose witchcraft. I choose to cast spells. And I wondered if you could say more about the connection that you have with witchcraft.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's like hazier than ever, because I was, it's something that was, really important for me in, around the time that the years this book is focused on, like 2016, 17, 18-ish. I was really into it then. I had finally felt like I could just do my own thing within witchcraft a little bit. I didn't have to be initiated into a coven. I didn't have to have all these ingredients in the big book of spells, whatever it's called, the witchcraft encyclopedia I have. I could just, I started doing really simple magic with like candles and, various other things, just really simple practices that resonated with me and allowed me to like put, attach like physical acts to prayers and to intentions. I realized like that was really important to me, having some kind of physical action.
Uh-oh. I think you got muted by accident. Hold on.
I think maybe, Elissa, you're just a little far from your laptop, if that's possible.
It sounded like she was accidentally muted. But maybe. I think.
Is it working now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It had selected a weird microphone that I actually don't use.
So you were talking about we were talking.
Oh yeah, witchcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was doing that for a while. I was really into tarot and spells, and I was like really into astrology, especially. Mm-hmm. And I think through the process of writing this book, especially once I got toward the end, it just became really like the connection with some kind of power in the universe that I was seeking through all of that. I was so much, closer to it through writing, through the process of like finding synchronicities in research. And I would love to talk to you more about that if you have like this experience too. Like all of these things in my research would line up in ways that seemed absolutely impossible. Like it really seemed like it was magic to just have all these resonances, ringing as I was looking through texts and movies and playing video games and stuff. That became so much more powerful to me than trying to control things using spells, and know the future for sure using tarot and astrology, which is not how they're meant to be used, but I'm a control freak in many ways. But the writing process allowed me to give up control, to just receive, like, which seems so counterintuitive to me, but it was just such a powerful experience in receiving something and listening to my own intuition. And that's kind of where I landed by the end of the writing process. After I finished the book, I didn't do any more work with spells. I kind of stopped reading tarot.
I stopped looking into astrology for, I think, different reasons earlier, maybe, which was that astrologers were like really giving so many warnings about how terrible 2020 was going to be that I couldn't handle it. And I was really paranoid.
Wow. Wow.
Worse than I expected. So anyway, I think that's where I'm at now. I still find that like very much in my, in my writing process, these things, these connections I seek out are just realized in this way that seems unexplainable at times.
You know what, Elissa, it reminds me of the time you and I were together and we were at the retreat. And I know that you remember this when we wanted to just take a break and sit under a tree.
Yeah, I knew you were going to mention that moment.
And I swear that a squirrel threw itself out of the tree. It did not jump. It threw itself because I think it landed like flat on its stomach and then got up and ran.
Yeah.
And I think we both freaked out, lost our minds. And reading this book, I couldn't help thinking about that moment again. I mean, speaking of the way that the universe does things, the way that, there's an energy that might come up that can't be explained. I felt like that day was a portal into that thing. And in particular, when there was this moment when you write in the book about going into this house, not the house that you have now, but another house, and the door would not the door would not open. And it makes me think about, I wish that I had read this book right after we had that experience with the squirrel, because I would have a lot of questions for you about, does this happen often? Is this something we don't realize about the energies in this world? But I think that I found my answer, or one type of answer in here, but it leads to a question. I think that you see this world in many different layers happening all at once. There's the history, there's this historical moment, and you speak about your great grandfather, and you have this lineage that's both native and is it Irish? I don't remember now.
Irish and Ukrainian and Polish and
and you have, so there's this heritage that you are carrying, that we all carry with us. And then there's you, the writer, reckoning with what it means to be native in this country, what it means to look into witchcraft and be native, what it means to be native and listen to Phil Collins, which I would really love to talk about. I'm giving you all this so you can pick whatever one, and then and then being native and playing the video game Oregon Trail 2. And I have to tell you, when I read that part, I just felt so uncomfortable reading it because this clash of histories that's happening there. But I'm bringing all of this up to see if you could talk about any one or all of them, about how I think you see yourself as something connected to a place, connected to land. And then there's this history that tells you this doesn't belong to you. And could you talk more about how your writing negotiates all of this?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. I think, My first book dealt so much with questions of identity, like just who am I? How do I define myself? I'm defined by all these documents about, these medical records and, whatever else, defined by mental illness, defined by the violence done to me, defined by not just being Native, but, the way that white people see me as fractionated. And I just felt like I've done the identity thing. I'm tired of explaining myself and like justifying my existence and, just constantly explaining to settlers who I am and why I like actually do exist as I am. I just didn't want to like explain who I was anymore. And I was interested in asking like, well, who are you all? Like, what is all this stuff? What is like, why don't you all explain yourselves? Let's look at you for a second, Oregon Trail 2 game, And I think I just kind of in some ways was like, I know who I am. I'm solid in that now. I'm older than I was when I wrote my first book. I know who I am. So I am the fixed point of all of these essays as this self with a trajectory I can very clearly chart through sobriety, through heartbreak, through just like becoming an adult. And, I think instead of trying to define myself with settler culture as the fixed point, I wanted to be the fixed point and call settler cultural items into question. And I think just like kind of decenter whiteness generally. And I think the Oregon Trail 2 essay is a good example of this. So that's a game where you play, I started playing it when I was, I guess it was like 10 or 11, I think. And you have to play as a settler going west on the Oregon Trail. And, at the time, I was so used to that being the experience of, of American culture, like that I was supposed to just accept that I was something that I was not. And so I think in this book, I'm doing a lot of playing along with that and while pointing out how weird it is. And, and at the same time, it felt like a somewhat defiant act to get something useful out of it that was not what was intended. And I think that's kind of like the magic that I'm trying to talk about in like the title White Magic is, like white people's art that I managed to find magic in ways that, the creators didn't intend at all. I don't know whether, did I answer your question? Did I miss part?
You did. No, you did. And I know we are coming up to the Q&A and I don't know if we have questions or.
Not yet, just a reminder.
Okay.
So Maaza, please keep going.
Yeah, I have another question. I wondered about the process of writing about your relation. There was one relationship that seemed to be a central in the book, but just relationships in general. Writing about it in this book, did it reveal things to you that you were surprised?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing that I was surprised to notice, which I think I wrote about in the footnotes, I was surprised to realize how, even though I had come in to, create this indictment of all my exes for being withholding and not loving me and all of that, I realized like I was extremely withholding. I was like probably more so than them. I absolutely refused to, give them any affection that required some kind of vulnerability in me. Like I had my way of performing affection that was, I didn't see at the time that it was like extremely demonstrative, but extremely safe within my own patterns. And I think realizing that was very jarring. The thing that I realized that kind of like was the big answer to the question of the book was, it was at the end of the drafting process. I had written everything but the last essay in the book. And so the last essay is about the game Red Dead Redemption 2, which I'm obsessed with. And the way that I was just thinking about men while thinking about those men who are the characters in the game really made me realize that I was drawn to dangerous men. And that was the realization that I came in with, basically. Like, that's how I started the book. And I just didn't really, I knew I was drawn to the wrong men. I knew that throughout the entire writing process, but it was like, I finally not just knew it, but like knew it like extremely deeply by the end. And once I like completely accepted it and understood it, then the book was over. And then that cycle ended too. Like I figured it out and I got to, put it in the past.
Thank you, Elissa. I just started coughing all of a sudden. I'm so sorry. I wondered if it felt like this book was also a kind of a reckoning, looking at what was left after the first other books that you've written, considering the aftermaths of sobriety, of alcoholism, or and moving into into sobriety and the sober, like the realities of that. And I was struck by the way that you, again, I said before, but the way you were integrating music and other elements into your considerations of who you are in this moment, who you were back then, and what do these things have to teach you. And I wondered if you could you talk about music? Excuse me.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I haven't really thought about this very much, but the first thing that comes to mind is that I have such a weird relationship with talking about music and writing about music. I think in part it's because when I was in college radio, and there's like that joke about oh, you like such and such band, name whatever of their albums, whatever the joke is. Like, that was my life for a while. Like I couldn't, I was not a good enough Broken Social Scene fan or whatever. And like, I didn't like the proper Sonic Youth albums. I liked the ones that were too commercial. I just had so much experience of music being something that had to be very private for me. I couldn't talk about it because I was, gonna get mocked or told that I wasn't authentic enough or like legitimate in my interests. So, and that continued with boyfriends. Somebody I went out with for a while, with him and his friends, I always felt really self-conscious about my taste in music. And I became just really I thought about, I just thought that, I don't really talk about that. It's not going to end well. So when I think it was like 2017, I published this essay about the band Bush and their album Razorblade Suitcase. And I was thinking like, wow, this is a big step for me. I'm finally like writing about music, until I realized in my first book, I wrote plenty about music, Britney Spears and Nirvana. I think that I still don't love to talk about music with people. I feel like very uncomfortable when just like talking about it with friends. But I think that a way into it for me is talking about like the lived narratives that are part of that, like in this book, thinking about Phil Collins and his like celebrity memoir about sobriety or whatever his memoir was about, I don't know. And of course, like such a big focal point of the book is the narratives around the relationship between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. And I'm so fascinated with the way their relationship was both real and performance. Like, and it's very hard to tell what is real and what is not, which is such a big thing in the book as a whole.
That was a fascinating moment. And also the Phil Collins, because I realized there was a moment in there where you ask the reader, or maybe you're asking yourself, do you know the words to this song? And I'm like, oh my God, I actually realized I don't think I know it. But it was, I think all readers will appreciate when they read this book, the way that you do look at music. You look at the musicians and the lived experiences, their lived experiences, and the way that connects to their creativity in a way that I see you doing with yourself in this book, like almost the songs as memoir, mini moments in lovely ways. I have one other question, but I don't know if there is another one that's come up from an audience, or
there is, in fact.
Okay.
I'll step in here. I'm sorry if I mispronounce this name. Ladane says, hi, Elissa, you mentioned having found the right book format for you, essay collection that includes ideas and memoir. Can you talk about how you opted for a book collection versus the more traditional memoir narrative? Was that because you felt it could encompass more varied content, or because the essays were written over a number of years, or because you thought it would allow for a more experimental structure?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I think, so the way that I work, I cannot outline, I can't know the entire trajectory of something from the outset. I actually began this book by like 10 years ago when I started trying to write a second book. I thought, like, let me make it easier than my first book and outline everything so I can just, get in and get out, like have the whole structure and just have it be like one big to-do list, every chapter, every beat, everything that I want to talk about. But I just wasn't interested in it. I think that the way that I work that has ended up working for me is that I just start somewhere with some interest or some question or like some, pop culture item or topic, whatever. I start with just something that's small and manageable. And I just keep writing through that as long as it's still interesting, and basically until the essay no longer wants to be written. I think that, I just haven't been writing in any form that I can sustain for more than There's an essay in here that's like 100 pages long, I think. And that's, that's unusual for me. I think that like, I just get really bored really quickly with my own stuff, and I don't know, with everything generally. So I don't want to linger anywhere too long in, spending too many pages in the same format, or I think it'll seem really monotonous to me. But so I don't necessarily, I think that like from a publishing perspective, they're different as they're distinct essays. But to me, I think of them more as chapters that just have different forms and different approaches and like maybe different, setting. But to me, there's not a whole lot of distinction between essay and chapter in my books.
That was great. Elissa and Maaza, thank you so much. Thank you for bearing with me through all the technical difficulties. And thank you to the audience. Please buy a copy of White Magic if you haven't yet.
Yeah, and just maybe before we close out, I do have one last question. And Elissa, what's next?
I was gonna try to take a break from writing because I didn't want to force myself into another project while I was still so interested in this one. I knew I was going to be talking about it a lot, and I didn't just want to jump into something else and be like, white magic, that's the past. Now I'm working on my whatever essay. But then I did start writing something in the fall. And I think I can tell, at least right now, what this book is about that I'm working on. It's about living between apocalypses. I've written about, the apocalypse that came to my ancestors in what's now Western Washington. A lot of like several generations were killed by disease, probably malaria and smallpox, but malaria was the worst. And just, like what that left us with, and the sort of like apocalypse on the horizon that it seems like people are more and more, I don't know if people are talking about it more than ever, but it seems like it's bigger in my mind than in the past, the potential for the apocalypse. I don't know what it is. So I wrote one essay that was about that. It's also about like chronic illness, and I don't know, I'm just trying to write about things that are fascinating to me. So right now that's the stock market.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Elissa. It was really wonderful to talk to you.
It's so good to see you. I miss you.
It's really good. I miss you too. I can't wait to see you in person one day soon, hopefully.
Soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maris.
Thank you, Maris. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah.